Welcome to the Voice of Islam. The Voice of Islam is a weekly radio program organized by the Islamic Council of Jamaica, the umbrella organization for the Muslim community in Jamaica, to propagate the message of Islam, dispel the common misconceptions about Islam, and facilitate a medium to provide the Islamic perspective on topical issues and alternative solutions. You may contact the Islamic Council of Jamaica at 648-9545. That's 648-9545. You are listening to the Voice of Islam. Before we begin, let's take a few minutes to listen to the recitation of verses selected from the final revelation to mankind, Al-Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون صدق الله العظيم. I seek refuge in Allah from the shaitan, the outcast. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. O you who believe, save yourselves and your families from a fire whose fuel is men and stones, over which angels are appointed, who are stern and severe, who flinch not from executing the commands they receive from Allah, but do precisely what they are commanded.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
So a question has actually come in to ask, and it's directed to Mrs. Bayam, that do you think it's harder for women to seek help with domestic violence, and what is your advice on how to tackle this? So Mrs. Bayam, this question came directly to you. So the question is, do you think it's harder for women to seek help with domestic violence, and what is your advice on how to tackle this?
It is hard, but I think it's more of a negotiation with yourself. When should I go? Now, typically what that woman goes through is that the first time she's saying, okay, all right, the circumstances was X, it was Y. So let me just bear with him. He promised. And then it goes again. And then it goes again. And each time there is some kind of making up and going on. And so what that woman is doing is balancing. She's balancing, okay, what I have, what I'm trying to hold on to, and the state of this thing. It's not so bad. It's not this. He lost control. He lost this. He lost that. And you keep going and you keep going. And it's that inching along. So in concept, it's not hard in the sense that every woman knows, okay, this is wrong and it should be reported. Even if you start within your community to an elder person, right? An elder, imam or whoever you want to choose. But it's a negotiation that keeps it going, balancing. Okay, I don't want to expose him and then he fixes it, so I'll go. And it's that negotiation and keeping inching along that is hard. Because after you inch along to a certain point, it's so heavy that you realize you alone are carrying it. So it means now that you've got to decide when is enough. And that's a very, very difficult decision because exposure is the other thing that maybe even you can't take. So all the time you're going, you're hoping that this could be resolved in privacy. But then the irony is privacy protects it. And most of the times it grows. So whereas you're trying now to say, okay, we'll do it in privacy, you're almost ensuring the continuity because exposure is your very first step. And if you can make the decision to do that, then you actually have a better chance of overcoming it. And if you do it early enough, then you improve your chances even more. Because remember, that perpetrator, that abuser, we saying perpetrator, but that's your husband. That's your so it's like, okay, even admitting that term to your husband is hard. So what we're saying is the earlier the better. But then you're saying, okay, I need to give him a chance. I need to give him a chance. So these are the decisions and the negotiations that are hard. But typically, early exposure gives everybody the best chance.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
Okay, I really, really appreciate that comprehensive response. And I think that's very important that we do highlight that, because exposure is important. That is very important. And I mean, we learned that from the last session. And of course, where Sister Bibi, she told us that the first time it happened, she decided she was going to the police. And he convinced her that, no, he'll change, he won't do it again. And she said the second time she made the effort, and then after it got less. So this is important, early exposure. I really love that. And that is very important, as you mentioned it.
And early, just let me cut you. Sorry to cut you. Early, you can go within your community. You can graduate in terms of steps.
Perfect.
So the first time, you don't need to do police yet. Go within.
Perfect.
To somebody, because it's gradual exposure, but it is important that some level of exposure is done. Because remember, if you try, and this is why you need to give yourself a chance to make reasonable and appropriate decisions. If you go the first time to police, you have big consequence for small action, and you are still trying to reconcile that in your mind. Oh my God, I don't want him locked up for that. I mean, it's bad, but it wasn't so bad. I don't want that level of consequence for him. And then you wrestle with yourself till you talk yourself out of it. So early exposure, yes, but you can graduate it. Go first within to some figure of some kind, and then keep the exposure going. So each time it must be known that we go in broader with exposure. That perpetrator must know that the next time it means I'm going outside the circle again, or I keep going, increasing the exposure. Because otherwise, if you try to carry that load in private, it's going to be too heavy for you.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'd like Dr. Tijani to chime in. I actually have two questions. Well, more than two, but as I said, I'm reserving my questions. So one of the quick points I'd like to ask Dr. Tijani, based on your experience, are boys and men abused? So yes, we have focused a lot on women, but do you find that boys and men are also being abused as well?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good very good question. And when we bring this matter up of domestic violence, a lot of times our minds instantly check, or we instantly turn to the abused being the woman and the abuser being the man. But what you find in some instances is that, unfortunately, especially young boys in the homes are tolerating a lot of, whether it be, verbal, psychological, emotional, and then physical abuse. And then the added pressure for the boys is, yeah, man, you have to take that, So it's also, it goes down to the root of what it means to be a young male in society, is that you kind of just tolerate the abuse. And then let's not even go to sexual abuse, because when it goes to that point, then it's almost as if it's sometimes almost like a badge of honor if the abuser is a woman, because then, oh yeah, she do this, you're a big man. But it's trauma, and it's a traumatic experience. And then there are so many other layers that happen. Then when we look at the physical violence part, when a lot of these young boys come in, whether it is that it was done by a penetrating wound like a knife, or a belt buckle, and it injured the eye socket and so on. Unfortunately, we have gotten to a point sometimes as a society where we've normalized violence, and it's kind of almost expected. And so when these boys are going through a lot of this trauma, they come to almost accept it, like, this is something I just kind of have to go through. And then they now inflict this trauma onto others. And so it's a really, really big issue for young boys and men. And there are some young men who are in homes, in families, where they are really being abused as well. And who are they going to say it to? Their friends are going to say to them, say, you may do one of this, right? Not realize that it can happen. And it's a traumatic experience. And the more that it is exposed, the more that there are environments and opportunities for young men to speak about it, is the better it's going to be for everyone. Because as we said, the home is supposed to be a place of tranquility for everyone that is involved, for the wife, for the husband, for the children.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
I love that. I love that. And you see, this is one of the objectives of this program, because you mentioned it, that yes, when the boys are being abused, then it ends up, they're becoming adults and they are now the abusers. And this is what we really want to get engaged in. We can't do it in an hour. And it's something that we really have to address and be continuous with it to see how we can make this particular change in society. So this is a very good point. There's another question I'd like to ask you until the other questions come up. So I love that point, and I'll just emphasize it again. Yes, so boys, yes, are also being abused. Males are being abused, and it's important to tackle it as well, because sometimes, yes, in society, no man, yeah man, you can't be abused. And you know, you won't speak about it because you know that this is the response you are going to get, and say, yeah man, you're done big man now, you know. These are times that the things, and people are going through this trauma, and then when they now reciprocate it, when they now put it on others as adults, you're going to say they're cruel beings. But of course, you don't understand what happened to them. Their minds became warped from they were 8, 9, 10 years old. So by the time they're 20 years old, they're broken, completely broken. And that's important you mentioned that. Another important thing is because, I mean, you being a married brother with experience, so I'd like to ask you a particular question. How important you think it is before marriage to speak about this issue? For example, violence. So premarital counseling, but specifically this being a part of premarital counseling. How important do you think it is to really have this as a means of discussion?
I think this is, this is one of the avenues or areas where one of the Islamic framework of the wali, the individual who, whether it be your father or uncle or this male figure, who when two persons are interested in getting married, that this is where the investigative part becomes very, very important, to actually find out from that person or find out about that person, how was their childhood, how did they grow up, how do they solve problems, how do they problem solve? People will say certain things sometimes that also give you the allowance. He said, so what do you think? Yeah, man, certain things have happened, and if people don't, I used to say, wait, so, but how you deal with the issue when it come up? And they'll tell you, and then once they start telling you, and you start seeing red flags, and you're walking yourself into that issue, that's also something that we have to really start taking it all the way back to the point of discussion, where when two persons are getting to know each other, they start having these frank discussions, right? And so we say to the young woman, actually say it to him from the get-go. Once you're having this in your premarital sessions, whether it be premarital counseling or otherwise, you say, listen, one thing I will not tolerate and I don't expect, and I'm not good. You actually put that out on the table so that both persons understood it, something that was discussed, so that when it happened, it's not like, wait, what? Where did that come from? You can't say, no, but we talked about this and you told me you are not this type of person. Or he would say, I'm a very gentle person. I don't like being shouted at. And then when you go into the relationship, now she starts shouting at you, yelling at you, putting you down, insulting you, slapping you across the face. You say, wait a minute. We had this discussion. This was never a part of it. So it has to come to the forefront, and it is very, very important. And, the second framework in Islam that's also important is that, there are certain things that you can be shy about, but if you as a person know that your brother has a propensity to be abusive, you have to say it. You can't just, I'm going through it and this and that. He had that issue in the previous marriage. He hasn't gotten it sorted out. He hasn't sorted counseling. He doesn't see it as a problem. And you see another sister walking into the situation. So it is very, very important. It is something that we recommend that persons put on the table, and that in their premarital counseling session, it should be brought up and discussed openly, so that it is there are solutions that are found before the sister or the brother has walked into the situation. And then, as they say in Jamaica, the horse gone through the gate.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Yes, before the horse gone through the gate. So that is a Jamaican saying. And I'm really happy that we're looking at this. So, and that's an important. So we hear that questions are coming in. So a question has come in: how can children escape? And I ask Mrs. Bayam to respond to this. How can children escape from an abusive family member?
Okay. Now we need to know that children are not decision makers. They cannot make change decisions. So it's not really up to the child to escape an abusive family situation. That takes some adult partnership, some adult acknowledgements. All a child can do is make known what's happening. And it is up to the adult in the situation to take it seriously, to take responsibility for changing that family dynamic. Now, understand the hindrances in this case. One, are you going to believe the child? So what I want to mention is how it's viewed before I complete that answer, because even in the prior discussion just now, there's always a kind of externalized view of this abuse thing. So when, let's say, as Dr. Tijani was mentioning, they go and they say, it's because this happening, it's because that happening. And if she or he stop doing that, then the abuse will stop. So it's sort of an externalized view of it that says, if that stops, then my behavior will stop. And it's the same way we look at families with children. Children are not decision makers. So it's like, okay, it's either they stop saying these awkward things that making us all uncomfortable, or they run away. How can a child do that? So, and in each case, it's still appropriate. And that's why children decide to stay quiet. Because what are the options as a child? If I say it, everybody's uncomfortable and that child is making trouble. If I run away, you're worrying everybody, why you do such a thing? Why didn't you say something? So it's really not about how can a child get out of that. It's about how can we get families into a healthy, functional manner that when something negative is happening, an adult can verify, take responsibility, and agree within themselves to make these changes that the family needs to make. And in some cases, it shatters a dynamic that people were all relying on. And it will change things forward forever. And a lot of people don't want to do that. So it's really about a child can come out when they have an adult who is willing to take responsibility and clarify the situation and take action if it is true and valid.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
Perfect. And this is why, so of course, this is why we leave the questions open to you all. That is a fantastic response. So yes, the child can't just escape, because where's the child going to decide to go? As you said, they are not decision makers. So it's really important that there is a structure, of course, that recognizes when this is actually happening, and then it is dealt with from that particular side. So I'm going to ask Dr. Tijani to just give some input, some advice. I would love for you to give a few words of advice to the men, the women, and the abused. A few words of advice, Dr. Tijani. I'd like to ask you to give a few words of advice to the men, the women, and the abused.
Mark. So again, I also want to thank Mrs. Bayam and Dr. Ward. So I'm also learning, and I think that's also very, very important. We all realize that we can all learn, and if we're going to continue to provide the support that we're willing to learn. So in summary, number one, don't view it as a character flaw. Number two, get the exposure and the help that you need. And then number three, just realize, and this is for the rest of us, right? Even if you're not in this situation, realize the effects that it has on the individual, on the family, on the society. Just realize that it has multifaceted effects, no matter which area you want to look at it, psychologically, emotionally, financially, the effects are just so extensive, So again, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Tijani. We really appreciate that. You have all done a very good representation of this issue. What we can say within our final minutes that are remaining, that this topic, it has not ended. The discussion has just started. So it is important for us, one, to create this level of awareness, to acknowledge it, two, to understand and look for the signs and see how we can assist with this particular issue. And of course, the importance of having an alliance, the importance of reaching out, knowing where we can get assistance, knowing how we can do this level of support. So it's very important. I'm thanking all the panelists. I mean, unfortunately, our time has basically expired in this session. So I must just say thank you again to all of you. Thanks to the viewers. And we really hope that we can continue this discussion. So in conclusion, we would like to end and say domestic violence, child abuse, every form of violence, it is unacceptable. And we must all play our part in eradicating this disease.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings to all. My revert story is a long story, but I'll try to make it as short as possible. I became Muslim on March 23rd, 2018. I originally grew up in a Catholic home. I got christened, I did First Communion, and while I was going to get my confirmation at about 13 or 14, it dawned on me that I didn't really believe in the Trinity or the concept of the Trinity after doing my own thought. So I didn't go along with my confirmation. After that, I searched for answers for years. I looked into Rastafarianism. I looked at other religions as well. But I didn't look on Islam because of the stigma in the media and my fear of it. But in searching for myself, I also looked to many civil rights figures, especially Marcus Garvey. He was one of the first people I started to read more about. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, or El Haj Malik El Shabazz. And he really stuck out to me. I read his biography. So from that moment, it made me ask the question, what was Islam? But I kind of put it on pause after that. But I'm a very avid history lover. I love history. I read a lot about history that wasn't taught in school to me. And I love the history that was taught to me at school as well. But I like to get other perspectives and the other readings that wouldn't have been brought up to me while at school. So while I was doing some research on the Moors and Islamic Spain, Mansa Musa, and all of those great empires throughout Africa, the history, and in me doing that deep dive in history and seeing all of these great Muslim figures that lived, it made me wonder, what is Islam? Because I already put it on pause, so it piqued my curiosity again. What is Islam? Who is the Prophet Muhammad? So I asked a friend who I had, who was my roommate at university. I asked him, who is the Prophet Muhammad? What is Islam? And he explained it to me. He explained concepts to me. I asked him for a Quran, and he said just download the app, because there's a Quran app, a really good Quran app. So after reading it for about a month or two, I went back to him and said, bro, I need to become a Muslim, because I've believed this for a very long time. I always believed that there's one God. I always believed that He sent prophets and messengers to guide us. Just from my belief in that, I felt like I believed this. I believed that Islam was the truth. So I was very happy when I realized that I was a Muslim. I wanted to shout and tell the world, because up to that point I had been searching for answers, and it made me depressed, because it made me wonder what my purpose was. Why am I here? Is there a God? What am I living for? So Islam answered those questions to me, and it made me follow a righteous path that I know God would be pleased with. So that filled my heart, And I thank God every day for that, for guiding me to Islam. I thank him. All praise is due to him. Alhamdulillah. So that is my Islam story. Assalamu alaikum, may peace and blessings be upon you all. Love.
Thank you all for listening to The Voice of Islam, a weekly radio program organized by the Islamic Council of Jamaica to propagate the message of Islam, dispel the common misconceptions about Islam, and facilitate a medium to provide Islamic perspective on topical issues and alternative solutions. Remember, you may collect a free Quran, yes, a free Quran, by emailing us, sending a text message, or visiting any of our locations. Please send in your questions and comments to islamradiojm@gmail.com. That's islamradiojm@gmail.com, or by text message to 892-1350. That's 892-1350. You may also visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/Islamic Council of Jamaica, or find us on Instagram at ICOJ_official, or you may listen to a past episode on our YouTube channel, Islamic Council of Jamaica. You may also visit any of the following locations: Islamic Council of Jamaica, 24 Camp Road, Kingston 4. Masjidul Aziz, Portmore Central Plaza, West Tradeway, Portmore. Masjidul Rahman, Windsor Road, Spanish Town. Islamic Dawah Center, 1 McCarthy Street, Montego Bay. Masjidul Hakim, 138 Main Street, Ocho Rios. Masjid As-Sabr, Albany, St. Mary. Masjid Hussein, 3 Miles River, Westmoreland. Masjidul Haq, New Green Road, Mandeville. Masjid An-Nur, Port Maria, St. Mary. Masjidul Ihsan, West End Road, Negril. Masjid Al-Taqwa, Newell, St. Elizabeth. Masjid Ibrahim, Riversdale, St. Catherine. Masjid As-Sakina, 26 Miriam Way, Montego Bay. Peace be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Oh